Why is it so easy to risk everything when you have nothing, and so difficult to make decisions when you finally have something to lose? This is a question almost no one asks, but it completely changes how you view money, discipline, and wealth building. Perhaps you've already experienced this, or perhaps you're approaching this point without realizing it. The fact is, there's a silent moment in the financial journey where the game changes, and those who don't understand this end up paying a high price. There's a very popular belief in the world of personal finance that discipline is born from scarcity. That disciplined people are those who started from scratch, suffered, went through hardship, and therefore learned to control themselves. This idea is beautiful, inspiring, but rarely true. In practice, most people only discover what true discipline is when they stop fighting to survive and start fighting to protect, when money ceases to be just a distant dream and becomes something real, accumulated, visible, something that can be lost. Up to a certain point in the journey, making mistakes seems harmless. Making impulsive decisions seems courageous. Spending a little more seems rewarded. Risking everything on a dubious opportunity seems ambitious. After all, when you haven't yet built wealth, the emotional cost of a mistake is low. You fall, you get up, and you move on. But there's a symbolic number, an invisible line, that completely changes this logic. Many call this point the first 250K. Not because it's magical, but because that's where the shark door begins to open. When you cross that threshold, something strange happens inside your head. The same behavior that once seemed daring begins to seem dangerous. Excitement gives way to calculation. Haste gives way to caution. And the discipline that was once promised for "when I earn more" appears in an almost uncomfortable way. Not out of motivation, but out of conscious fear. Fear of going backward. Fear of destroying years of effort in a poorly thought out decision. Fear of realizing that building was difficult, but losing can be quick. Have you ever felt this way? That feeling that now any mistake weighs more heavily. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Few people talk about this phase because it's not glamorous. It doesn't yield catchy phrases. It doesn't generate screenshots of quick results. But it's precisely here that many stagnate, freeze, or sabotage themselves without realizing it. The discipline that arises when you already have something to lose is silent, lonely, and extremely demanding. And it is precisely this internal, almost invisible change that separates those who merely get close to the shark gate from those who truly learn to live on the other side. Because from this point on, it's no longer about making money, but about understanding the weight of protecting it. And it is exactly at this point that the conversation starts to get interesting. Perhaps, as you listen to all this, a memory is surfacing on the other side of the screen. A moment when you realize that your decisions began to weigh more heavily, that money ceased to be just a distant number and began to represent time, effort, sleepless nights, and difficult choices. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Sometimes a simple phrase says a lot. When you share your experience, you're not just talking to me, but to other people who are in exactly the same phase, feeling the same doubts and silent fears. And if, in any way, this reflection made you think differently about discipline, wealth, or the moment you're in today, consider liking this video. This simple gesture helps the content reach more people who may need to hear exactly this right now, even without knowing it. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and continue bringing conversations that are usually hidden, far from the superficial discourse about easy money and quick success. If you feel this type of content resonates with your reality, subscribing to the channel is a way of saying, I want to continue this journey. Because what comes next delves even deeper into this invisible aspect of wealth building, that moment when the game changes from the inside before it changes from the outside. And the more people walk together, the stronger this message becomes. Stay with me, because from here, the conversation begins to descend to a deeper level, exactly where almost no one likes to look. Before reaching 250K, almost everything seems lighter than it actually is. There's a strange sense of freedom that accompanies this phase of the journey, as if making mistakes is part of the game, and in a way, even necessary. Decisions are made with more emotion than strategy, and this is often mistaken for courage. Buying something slightly above budget doesn't seem serious. Entering an investment without understanding all the risks sounds audacious. Investing time, money, or energy in shortcuts seems like just a desire to speed up the process. And, at that moment, it almost never really hurts. The problem is that this lightness doesn't come from confidence. It comes from the absence of immediate impact. When there isn't yet a solid foundation, mistakes don't leave scars. They become history. They become lessons learned. They become something you recount later as part of the journey. And this creates a dangerous mindset because the brain learns that impulsive decisions don't have real consequences. At least not now. That's where carelessness disguised as courage is born, this attitude where everything seems permissible because there isn't much left to protect yet. At this stage, many confuse movement with progress. Making decisions all the time gives the feeling of moving forward, even when these decisions lack a clear direction. Small expenses go unnoticed. Investments are made more on promise than logic, and important choices are postponed with the idea that I'll organize it later. There's a hidden truth here. While assets are small, the emotional impact of a mistake is less than the psychological impact of waiting. Doing something wrong seems better than doing nothing. And that's why so many people feel comfortable living in this state for years. The journey becomes a sequence of attempts, adjustments, and restarts, always with the feeling that there's still time. It's not serious yet. It doesn't need to be so disciplined yet. But this mindset gradually solidifies, shaping how you make decisions, how you react to risks, and how you handle money when it finally starts to appear. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the most delicate point of this phase is not the mistake itself, but the identity that is silently being built. The identity of someone who has become accustomed to operating on el improvisation, who trusts more in impulse than in process, who believes that they can always fix things later. This mentality works as long as there isn't much at stake. But it exacts a high price the moment the transformation begins to happen, and the scenario changes without warning. It's in this behind-the-scenes phase of the journey that many seemingly harmless decisions accumulate, creating patterns that are difficult to break. And when the shark door begins to open, these patterns don't disappear on their own. They come along with it. That's why understanding this phase isn't about judgment. It's about awareness, about realizing where you are now and what habits you're carrying with you, even without realizing it. If this resonates with your reality, comment below. This makes sense to me. When your net worth starts approaching 250K, something changes almost imperceptibly. There are no applause, no announcements, no feeling of permanent victory. On the contrary, the atmosphere becomes quieter, and this silence, for many people, is uncomfortable. The world doesn't react differently. The people around you remain the same, but inside, a profound shift occurs. Decisions that were once made with enthusiasm are now accompanied by a constant question: what if I lose? This is where the nature of discipline changes. It ceases to be driven by the desire to achieve something new, and becomes guided by the responsibility of preserving what has already been built. Earning more remains important, of course, but it is no longer the central focus. The focus begins to shift towards avoiding mistakes, not exposing oneself unnecessarily, not compromising years of effort on choices that previously seemed too small to warrant attention. The hidden truth is that the greater the wealth, the smaller the margin for impulsive decisions, and this requires a silent transformation of mindset. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this is precisely where many people get stuck without understanding why. The game becomes more dangerous not because the risks visibly increase, but because they become subtle. The big bets disappear and give way to seemingly simple choices. Where to keep the money, when to move it, when not to move it, who to trust, who not to believe. Every detail starts to have an impact, and what was once emotion becomes calculation. What was once haste becomes waiting. What was once noise becomes silence. This silence is uncomfortable. For those who built everything through improvisation, it demands patience, ego control, and a discipline that doesn't generate immediate dopamine. There's no feeling of rapid progress, no exciting stories to tell. There's only consistency. And that's precisely why many make invisible mistakes at this stage. They try to recreate the excitement of the beginning, take unnecessary risks, and relax thinking that now everything is under control. It's in this backstage of the journey that assets begin to slip away without fanfare. Another delicate point is that fear changes form. Before, the fear was of not moving forward. Now, the fear is of falling. And this fear can paralyze as much as it can protect. Some people become excessively conservative. Others pretend that nothing has changed and continue acting as if they were still at the beginning. Neither extreme usually works well. The true discipline of this phase lies in learning to live with the constant tension between protecting and moving forward, between prudence and opportunity. This is a phase of internal, almost solitary decisions, where external validation disappears. Few people understand the weight of protecting something that took years to build. Few people realize that the greatest impact lies not in the big choices, but in the small concessions made repeatedly. And when this awareness begins to emerge, it doesn't come as relief, but as responsibility. A responsibility that redefines the entire journey from that point on and prepares the ground for even deeper understanding. If this passage resonates with what you're going through right now, comment below. I'm on this journey too. There's a discipline that only reveals itself after the shark gate has been crossed, and almost no one likes to talk about it. Not because it's secret, but because it's too boring to become aspirational content. It doesn't appear in photos, doesn't generate impactful phrases, and rarely earns applause. Yet, it's this invisible discipline that sustains everything that has been built so far. It's a profound, silent change of mindset that happens far from the gaze of those who still associate success with constant movement. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this is the part of the journey that most confuses newcomers. Unlike what many imagine, this discipline isn't about working longer hours, waking up earlier, or giving your all. It's much more about stopping accepting bad invitations, stopping chasing every opportunity, stopping confusing novelty with progress. Saying no becomes a skill as important as knowing how to decide. And saying no, in practice, requires more emotional strength than saying yes. Protecting liquidity becomes a priority, even when the ego demands action. Keeping money idle, waiting for the right moment, seems wrong to those conditioned to act all the time. But there's a hidden truth here. Those who have crossed that threshold understand that not losing is as powerful as winning. This discipline manifests itself in small decisions repeated daily. Decisions that seem too simple to deserve attention, but which accumulate impact over time. It's choosing not to get involved in something everyone is talking about. It's respecting processes even when they seem slow. It's accepting that consistency doesn't provide the same adrenaline rush as risk. Another delicate point is ego control. After a certain level of wealth, the ego begins to exact its price. The desire arises to prove that you know more, that you got there through sheer merit, that you can break the rules, and that's exactly where many slip up. This invisible discipline demands constant, almost uncomfortable humility. It requires accepting that you don't need to be right all the time, that you don't need to win every argument, that you don't need to turn every decision into a demonstration of intelligence. This discipline is repetitive, almost monotonous. It doesn't change much from one day to the next. There are no major turning points, just careful maintenance. And perhaps that's why so few people manage to sustain it in the long term. The human mind seeks novelty, seeks excitement, seeks validation. But those who remain on the other side of the shark door learn, little by little, that true transformation happens precisely when nothing seems to be happening. Behind the scenes of this journey, what keeps everything afloat isn't grand schemes, but small, consistent choices. It's about giving up shortcuts, even when they seem safe. It's about understanding that some opportunities weren't meant for you, even if they're lucrative for others. It's about accepting that discipline at this stage isn't glamorous. It's about results. And when this awareness begins to take hold, something even deeper begins to emerge, because discipline ceases to be just a financial strategy and begins to shape decisions in other areas of life as well, creating an impact that goes far beyond money. If this resonates with what you're experiencing right now, comment below. This makes sense to me. There's a silent warning that almost no one gives when talking about crossing the shark gate, perhaps because it shatters the fantasy of arrival. Perhaps because it confronts an uncomfortable truth. The fact is that getting close doesn't mean staying, and crossing that gate isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of the most demanding phase of all. The phase where mistakes no longer come with noise, but with slow, almost invisible wear and tear. Many people imagine that those who lose everything after reaching a certain level of wealth make mistakes due to ignorance, lack of education, or absurd decisions. But the hidden truth is different. Most lose not because they did something explicitly wrong, but because they relaxed at the moment when they should have been more attentive. It's when vigilance decreases, when discipline becomes an automatic habit and caution turns into overconfidence. The danger lies not in a lack of knowledge, but in the feeling that, now I know enough. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is the most delicate point of the entire journey. When money finally exists, it creates a dangerous illusion of permanent stability. Decisions begin to be made with less rigor. Small concessions go unnoticed, and respect for one's own processes is relaxed. Nothing seems serious in isolation. The impact is not immediate. And precisely for this reason, the warning usually comes too late. This is the real turning point. It's not about making money. It's not about hitting a number. It's not about walking through a symbolic door. It's about learning to protect something that took years to build in an environment where ego, comfort, and routine work against you. Staying there requires a level of emotional and mental focus that few are willing to sustain. It requires accepting that risk never disappears. It only changes form. It requires recognizing that the greatest enemy is often not the market, but the very feeling of security. Behind the scenes of this phase, what brings you down isn't big bad bets, but the sum of small oversights. It's relying too much on scenarios that worked in the past. It's ignoring subtle signs of imbalance. It's confusing tranquility with control. The mindset needs to keep transforming, even when everything seems stable. Because the game doesn't forgive those who stop respecting it. There's something deeply uncomfortable about accepting that money doesn't resolve tension. It only shifts it. Before, the concern was arriving. Now, it's not falling. And this change demands emotional maturity, constant discipline, and the humility to recognize that staying is harder than conquering. This is the revelation that separates those who merely touch the shark door from those who learn to live on the other side without being expelled by their own carelessness. As this awareness begins to take hold, it prepares the ground for an even deeper understanding of decisions, protection, and responsibility. Because the journey no longer demands speed, it demands clarity. And it is from this clarity that other layers begin to reveal themselves, silently, demandingly, and transformatively. If this warning resonates with you, comment below. This makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation has somehow intersected with your own journey. And when that happens, it's worth sticking around. Subscribing to the channel is just a simple way to keep this kind of reflection reaching you, without noise, without empty promises, just content that helps you see more clearly the decisions that really matter when the game changes. If you want, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me. I read." And that also helps create this space for exchange between people who are going through similar phases, dealing with dilemmas that almost never come up in conversations about money. And if the video made sense to you, the like ends up being a silent sign that this connection happened here. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this phase after the Shark Gate. Click there and continue watching.